to the show, Max.
Thanks.
Welcome to
Happy
Sweaty Startup.
Yeah.
Welcome to the YouTube channel to me.
Yeah, welcome to my channel. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about some books. We've done a couple reviews of books. I talk about books a lot on my show here and there, but I have not done an episode dedicated to some books that I think you should read. But now that winter is approaching, now that Christmas is approaching, now that the slow season is approaching, the perfect time to dive into some books. Let's get started, man.
Yeah.
You go first. We're going to talk about our 10 favorite books.
Yeah, our 10 favorite books. We've together literally read hundreds of books.
I think over 200 books myself, and you've
Yeah.
read a couple hundred yourself as well.
Yeah, well over 100 for sure. I don't want to exaggerate if I'm quite wrong. I'm not sure.
I've read half of
a lot of books.
I've read half of a lot.
I literally attribute reading books probably the number one reason why I've had any form of success, because every time I read a good book, it gives me like 5 good ideas on how to implement in my business.
Before we dive in,
it's mind-blowing.
How do you read a book? Because I think that there's a lot of people that just skim these things. They listen to them on double speed on Audible while they're driving in traffic. I think the key, personally, for me, is actually reflecting on this stuff. I think these books, it's so easy to say, oh, these books are full of fluff, and oh, these books don't apply to me. And in my opinion, of course it doesn't apply to you. Who's going to write a book on your life? It's your job to read this stuff, think about it critically, and apply it. That's the hard part. Like when I sit down with a book, yes, I will read it on Audible or listen to it on Audible, but I almost always get the print copy so that I can sit and reflect on the book. I can underline, I can take notes, and I can tie it to my life. A lot of books have some really crappy parts that I don't like, but if I can get 1 or 2 gold nuggets from a book.
That's the thing. You're searching for that one nugget.
Yep. So a lot of people say, I hate this book, I hate that book. There's not a single book I hate if it gives me one thing that I take from it. I don't always agree with everything at all. I mean, if you're watching this, I'm sure you don't agree with Max every time he says something. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you don't agree with everything I say. The goal is to take a couple things from us that can make you a little bit better. That's the same way that I feel about books.
If we can give you one piece of information that helps you out, our job is done.
Exactly.
But yeah, there's a few different ways that I read books, and actually recently changed a little bit. It all depends on the kind of book that I'm reading. If it's like something like a biography or autobiography, then I'm totally fine just listening to that while I'm driving, because they're a lot easier to listen to, much less like information dense. It's more of a story. And I kind of use that more for like motivation than anything. And just kind of, I like learning how people that I idolize lived in their earlier days. So if I'm listening to a biography, it's pretty easy. But if it's like an information dense book, yeah, I'll sit down, I'll underline, I'll reread passages, I'll make notes in a separate notebook. And I think, how can I apply that right now? Because like you said, the information is only so good as information unless you actually apply it and, do something with it. But recently what I've done, in order to just allow myself to read more books, because I've found that sometimes you read a book and it's not that great, and then you get stuck on that book and you think, I want to read, but I just don't want to read that book. And it kind of puts you off. It delays you. Like I've found times where I'll go like a month and I didn't read a book, and I start to feel bad about it because I didn't want to jump back to that same book. And I listened to a podcast with Naval Ravikant. I'm not sure if you've listened to him before, but he talks about how he reads. And basically he's like, you don't need to give books the amount of respect you give books. You can open them, you can read a chapter, you can put it down, you can throw it away, you can do whatever you want with it. You can start in the end, you can start in the middle, you can read a little bit of it. It doesn't matter how you read it. And that kind of opened my mind to it. I never really thought about that, and pretty excited about that. I've read a couple books recently, literally because there's not such a weight on, do I need to finish this 500 pager? Yep.
And I do a morning reflection as well. So a couple days a week, I'll wake up with no input. I won't check my phone. I'll go straight to my computer that's in offline mode, and I'll type or I'll write in a notepad, and I will think on a concept. So what I like to do is keep a notepad while I'm reading a book and just jot down little concepts that I like. Like I like that concept. Oh, I can think on that. Oh, I like that little story. I'll take a note of that. And then I'll go back to those things and I'll reflect and I'll spend some time applying. And that's when I get the real value out of it.
Okay, well, I feel like I have to bring up one of my books now that you said
right
that.
Away.
Yeah, I don't think you've read this one.
I was going to bring up one of mine right away too.
Just because you said that line, because now you have to read this one. It's called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And basically it's about that. Like taking an idea and sitting down with no outside influence and literally spending hours on that one idea or question, writing everything you can about it, thinking every which way you can, go and take a walk with a notebook, you write notes about it. The whole book it's called Deep Work. It's about really digging into a problem. And basically his whole concept is when you do that, after so many hours, you find creative solutions that you wouldn't have otherwise. And he also points out that you can't just sit down once for an hour and expect to find a creative solution. So what he does, he tallies how many hours of deep work he has. Every hour he does a little hash mark on a little Post-it note on his computer. That way he is able to figure out the average amount of hours he needs before he has a new like revolutionary idea. And I can't remember the exact amount, but I want to say it's like he has to have 30 hours or something like that of focused time for every one amazing idea
Wow.
he has. And he's like, that really put it in reference to me, how much work I have to do, dedicated work in order to have those golden nuggets and really, find something amazing.
That is amazing. So I have a morning routine on my website, sweatystartup.com. If you check it out, that is exactly what you were talking about. Literally diving deep on a single topic with no distraction. I'll find myself revolutionizing an aspect of my business. I'll find myself changing the way I think and feel about something.
Yep.
I mean, there is so much different. I mean, my mind, I can't speak for everybody, but my mind is just scattered. It's all over the place. It's roaming. I can do meditation. I can do exercise, but it's just still so hard to control and organize my thoughts. So when I get it down on paper or when I'm typing, it's amazing what it can do. It's amazing.
And he says you shouldn't even touch your phone if you think of something that, I should look up the data on that. Don't do it. Save that for later. Keep focused on your one question, because as soon as you go on your computer, they're gonna be like, oh, what's on my email? What's going on there? Avoid all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's book number 1. We're jumping right in. So first of all, where can people find these books? My book list is on sweatystartup.com/book list. And you're going to put yours in the footer of this video.
Yep. In the description, I'll have links to all the books.
Beautiful. Okay. This is a book that I think is textbook style. I like some textbook style books.
Yeah.
And one thing that is extremely fascinating to me is the United States tax code for small businesses. This book, Small Business Taxes by J.K. Lasser, it is dense. It reads like a textbook, but I've literally read it 3 times, and it has made me understand tax codes extremely well. Very well, so that when my CPA is giving me advice, I can question it. I can look it up. I know what I'm doing when it comes to taxes, to deductions, what I can write off, my tax rates, how I can hire, meals and entertainment, travel,
Right.
all the stuff, depreciation, your vehicle mileage. That's so important. Like, should you buy your vehicle? Should you just use your personal vehicle and write off mileage instead? This is a book that I think if you are interested in entrepreneurship, make the time to get through this, and it will be interesting to you if you really care about saving some money on taxes.
I have not read that, but I will, because I think that'll be really helpful. This isn't on one of my lists, but I've read 3 entire books on how to read financial statements, which kind of goes into the same facet
it was
there.
good?
Oh yeah, I've read
What's one of them?
There's literally one that's called How to Read Financial Statements.
All right.
And it goes over like examples of small businesses, large businesses, what each categorization means, because sometimes you'll look at financial statements and you'll see a certain categorization, and there's so many things that could be that thing, like just advertising expense. Who knows what really goes into that. Yeah, exactly. So it's so helpful to be able to read that. And then in my businesses, I use a lot of ratios, like labor to revenue ratio, supplies to revenue ratio, and I measure those.
Advertising to revenue.
Exactly.
Yep. And that kind of determines the overall helpfulness and industry standards that you can compare it to. Amazing. I'll dive into that too.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So number 1, we got deep work. Number 2, we got small business taxes. What do you got? This is the 2012 version. I recommend getting the new one.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. You probably want, as far as tax code goes, the newest one.
Yep.
Because I think meals and entertainment changed last year a little bit. So
it did. So did the capital gains tax and all those things. So.
Yeah. So I guess if we're going textbook style, one that I like that's the size of a textbook, it's about 700 pages long and thick, is the Poor Charlie's Almanac. And that's probably, if not number 1, within the top 2 books I've ever read. Basically, it's the book that it's a compilation of speeches that Charlie Munger has given, basically over his entire life.
Who's Charlie Munger?
Yeah, Charlie Munger is basically second in command at Berkshire Hathaway. I don't want to say right-hand man to Warren Buffett because they're kind of equals, but he owns a majority of Berkshire Hathaway, which owns like 300 some companies, including Geico, Russell Athletic, Dairy Queen, Heinz Ketchup, just so many huge brands.
Warren and Buffett and Charlie Munger went around analyzing data on stocks before there was mass data, and so they had competitive advantages buying, investing, and it's really unbelievable what they have built.
Yeah, insane. So this book goes a lot into his core values and his importance on learning multiple different fields. So I think he has 23 different areas that he spends time learning on that you wouldn't think would apply to business, but you find the more you learn, the more things are related. And he pieces things down that it's important to learn this subject because of this. It's important to learn this subject because it applies here. And he does a lot on how you should never feel bad for yourself, which really stood out to me. And basically how there's never an advantage to feeling bad for yourself. you just got to go out in there and take action. And the example he uses, when he was in his late 20s or early 30s, one of his children died. And he basically had the example of, I could have, keeled over and my life could have been done there. But instead, that's he really started taking action, put his head down and, didn't let that drag him down. I mean, I'm sure he was extremely sad and horrible. Yeah. It was a horrible situation, but there's so many people that would have been the end of their life, basically. They would have let that drag them down. And I just thought that was
that's amazing.
So
that's
crazy.
Amazing. There is not a lot of advantage that comes with feeling sorry for yourself.
No.
Yeah. The victim mentality is pretty cancerous. Awesome. All right, I got one. EntreLeadership by Dave Ramsey. I'm trying to go off the beaten path. I mean, we all like E-Myth. We all like some books that are really well out there. We're trying to get some books out there that maybe you haven't heard of. EntreLeadership by Dave Ramsey. You know Dave Ramsey. He's the financial guru. He's the one that answers the phone calls and tells people not to spend money on credit cards. He has a very big empire of businesses. He's a real estate investor, and he lays out all of his basically business how-tos, his story, what he has learned in building his businesses, how to treat people, how to be a good boss, how to be a likable person. I think it's mainly around like employees, treating employees, being a good boss, like developing a culture in your workplace. But overall, phenomenal read, tons of practical advice, Dave Ramsey style. His religion, his politics are not involved in that book. I think that's an excellent book. I've gifted it a ton of times, and I've read it 3 or 4 times.
I haven't read that one, but I'll definitely read it. I just like reading about people who have done big things because there's just always something to glean from that.
Yeah, and it's story. It's a book of stories, which is what I like. It's stories of challenges that he faced as a business owner, and how he overcame them, and how he grew his business, and how he scaled his business.
Yeah.
So,
awesome. I'll definitely be checking that one out. In the same vein, a book by Paul Allen, who's the co-founder of Microsoft. It's his autobiography. It's called Idea Man. He's kind of the same kind of person as Charlie Munger because he had interest in so many different things. He co-founded Microsoft with Bill Gates. He was a billionaire by the time he was like 35 and actually retired from Microsoft from health reasons right around that same time. And I did not realize how many things this guy had done. Like, absolutely blew my mind reading this, how one person could affect so many people. And that's what really kind of hit me at home because he recently died. And thinking about the fact that there was literally millions of people that he positively impacted through his work and through his life because he funded so many museums. He funded all sorts of like artificial intelligence like institutes, brain imaging institutes, just so many things. And like some of the other businesses that he was part of, he owned 80% of Ticketmaster.
Wow.
Which is something
that business rakes in money.
Massive. Charter Communications was like one of his biggest failures. I think he lost a bunch of money on that, but that's a huge business as well. He owned the Seahawks and the Trailblazers.
Oh my gosh. I'm interested in the giving part. That's the exciting part because everybody talks about making money. I'm excited to get to a point where I can give. I can seriously give and seriously impact people. Right now, I'm giving my time. You're listening to me talk, but I'm excited someday to be able to do some stuff with the money.
Yeah, he built the Jimi Hendrix Museum, which offers like free music classes to the public, and spent like $300 million
as well,
on this museum. Dang. Just because he liked music, he liked playing guitar, like basically everything he liked, he positively influenced the world.
Use business as a tool to impact people. Yeah. That's the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah.
I love it. Any last thoughts on that book?
Go read it.
All right. All right. So I got one called The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. It's an old book about basically the bottleneck principle. And this basically, it's a story. It is a fictional story of a guy who comes in to try to take over a factory and figure out why a factory is failing. And he finds the bottleneck being one machine, but you can tell throughout the book that he is referencing just anything that you're working on. What is the bottleneck in your life? What is holding you back? What is the one thing that if you increased output of that one thing, it would make everything more efficient? But that is a book that very few people put on lists, that very few people have read. That is an amazing read, and it's an awesome story. Like, you will enjoy reading this, and you'll probably read it in a day because 120 pages, great story, some things that you can really take away from it. So The Goal, Eliyahu Goldratt, awesome book.
I've actually never even heard of that book.
Perfect. This is good because I haven't read any
I don't
of the
think
ones.
I've read any of those yet either. This is actually better than I thought. However, I do have a list and notes in my phone with 30 different books that I like on my next to read list. So it's just getting longer and longer and longer.
You got to get to work, man.
Yeah, I have so many to read.
How much time do you spend reading? Let's talk about that briefly. I know we're dragging on this video, but like, what percentage of your time reading? I think too many people study and never do anything.
So I used to spend a lot more, but it makes me happier when I spend more time. So
Okay.
in the last
It's a
month,
hobby then.
yeah, in the
Okay.
last month, I've spent quite a bit, probably on average 45 minutes a day.
Wow.
Before that, though, for I would say 3 or 4 months, I had spent not much, 5-10 minutes a day
Yeah.
on average, probably. But there's been periods of time in my life where I spent upwards of 2 hours a day reading
That's
and just
amazing.
like digesting content. But the thing is, yeah, when you're reading so much, you're not out doing things. So you got to find a good balance. But yeah, it is kind of like a hobby.
Yep.
The next one I'll do it quick because we have a whole video overview of this book. One of our favorite books is called Never Split the Difference. It's by Chris Voss. It's once you start reading this book, you'll finish it in a day or two because you'll realize that it literally applies to so many things in your life. It has to do with deal making, negotiation, but you realize your whole life is basically deal making and negotiation and
Your
and
friends,
decision
your
making
wife,
and-
your business partners, your people you interact with on a daily basis.
Yeah. Gives concrete examples on how to deal with all these situations. It's literally you will apply it the day after you read it.
Yep. And along the same line, so that's a book about emotion and how emotion is so important when you're negotiating or when you're trying to get your way in life. Ryan Holiday has a book called Ego is the Enemy. Have you read that one?
No.
That is a book on basically, it's a modern day take on Stoicism. Ryan Holiday is a 32-year-old New York Times bestselling author. He is awesome. He's got 5 or 6 books now on Stoicism, which Stoicism, if you aren't familiar with that at all, it is the art of basically understanding and having your emotions under complete control and realizing that there is no good or bad. It's just there. And your perception and how you choose to react to things makes your reality.
Yeah.
And Stoics are the ones that horrible, horrible, horrible things can happen to them, and they are going to make just as good of a decision as if an amazing thing or if they were in perfectly clear head. So the ego is the enemy is basically a book that goes hand in hand with Never Split the Difference, because Never Split the Difference is about recognizing the emotion of the person that you're negotiating with, of everyone else, and how to analyze that and how to get information, how to make a better deal when you're negotiating. The ego is the enemy is how to recognize your own emotions and how to hold back your own emotions and how to get really, really, really good at making decisions under pressure and keeping your ego out of it. Because as a business owner, like I got an ego, you got an ego. Part of the reason why we're successful is because we have such big egos, and that gets us far, but it can go way too far. Have a couple successes, and then you start to ignore information that doesn't support what you're going after. This book is phenomenal. He also has a book called The Obstacle is the Way. That is a phenomenal book about stoicism as well and overcoming obstacles. So I
like that
highly, highly recommend Ryan Holiday, those 2 books. I'm combining them into one because they're so similar, but phenomenal reads.
It almost seems like you should read that first, Ego is the Way, before you read Never Split the Difference, because a lot of the parts of Never Split the Difference is you need to have your internal state in place in order to effectively negotiate and deal make. So they kind of, like you said, they do definitely go hand in hand.
Yep. I would read The Obstacle is the Way first. I would read The Ego is the Enemy second, and I would read Never Split the Difference third.
There we go.
Yep. And that would be the power pack. And those things are things that you need to practice and you need to work on.
Yeah.
You cannot read about stoicism and grasp it. You have to think about it. You have to reflect on your days. You have to reflect on your interactions. You have to reflect on the last time that your emotions took over and kind of influenced you in a negative way. Basically, it's awesome stuff. And it makes you so much better at being a likable person, at being agreeable, and about being happier, basically.
All things we want.
Beautiful.
My last one is called Titan. It's the John D. Rockefeller biography. And this is someone that just doesn't get talked about very much. I mean, because he's happened so long ago. He died over 100 years ago. But his story is literally unparalleled.
I've read this one.
You have?
Yeah.
Oh,
Phenomenal.
so good.
Phenomenal.
So good. It's a huge book, though. Huge book. But just to give a little brief overview of him, by the time he was 30 years old, his companies owned 90% of the entire oil industry in the entire world.
Yep.
At 30 years old. Like the amount of money and power that comes behind that. I think his salary was something like $15 million a year when the average person's salary was $900 a year in the United States.
Yeah, the economy at that time is just fascinating to me. It was railroads and it was oil. Whoever could transport the goods and whoever had the oil to power the trains and the vehicles to transport those goods controlled the economy. And the Vanderbilts controlled the railroads and the Rockefellers controlled the oil. It started with kerosene because there was no electricity back then. So they needed kerosene to actually see at night. So if he was the provider of kerosene, he was the provider of light, which is unbelievable. And I mean, he's still the ratio to wealth will never be matched. I don't think.
And the reason he didn't own 100% is because he let the competitors have 10%. So like society didn't hate him. There's like a quote him saying that.
Yeah, he did some questionable things.
Yes.
He was extremely greedy, but he was also a philanthropist and just a brilliant businessman.
Yeah, and that's what I want to get into, the philanthropy end as well, because I'd heard that it's possible that he has saved more lives than anyone ever through his philanthropy efforts. So, however he did, plenty of shady things, which
basically
there's countless shady things.
His number one critique is the labor rights of his like the creating the oil wells and polluting the environment and having employees work in pretty dangerous, crappy situations. Him and Vanderbilt both got a lot of slack for that.
But he's also basically the reason why doctors wash their hands now.
Yep.
So insane.
Yep. And he's set up hospitals all over the country, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So, and another little fun fact. So Standard Oil, the company that he started, was broken up by the first antitrust. The companies now that are part of the broken up, you might have heard of their names before. ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP are all like descendants of his company.
Yeah. Combine all three of those together, and that's what Standard Oil was.
Yeah.
Back when there was no electricity to be the second source of power, or natural gas, really. It was unbelievable. So that's a phenomenal read. Shoe Dogs as well. Another one. Phil Knight, have you read that one?
Yep, that's a good one.
Phenomenal. Okay, so I got two more here. I think you're out of books. Maybe you can think of one more while I'm talking. But The Principles of Life and Work by Ray Dalio. Have you read that?
Very good.
Phenomenal book. He gets a little bit too philosophical. That's my one complaint. But man, it's good. Like, he's talking again about how to make really, really good decisions. And my main takeaway from that book is how he talks about blind spots. Now, he talks about your ego. He talks about your ego being a blind spot. He talks about all the information that you can't possibly know affecting your decision making and how he combats that. And I don't want to go too in depth, but man, Principles by Ray Dalio is amazing. Last book I have on my list is The Dip by Seth Godin. It's a short book, 75 pages. People complain about how short it is. I love it because I like reading it and reflecting on it and expanding on it. That's my favorite thing about books. So The Dip is about when to give up, how to think about what you're working on, what your long-term goals are, if it's worth the delayed gratification, thinking about value instead of money when you're building something like a business or a project or anything that's important to you. The Dip is a really good read. And Seth Godin in general, I love the way he thinks. I love Akimbo, his podcast, and several other of his books.
Yeah, him on any podcast is worth listening to.
Yeah, if you're going to listen to any episode of Seth Godin, listen to him on Tim Ferriss. He's got two episodes on Tim Ferriss. Phenomenal listens, and you'll be taking notes, and you'll be loving what he has to say.
Yeah, awesome. We don't want to make this too long.
We're at 23 minutes. That's not bad. I thought we could have went on for hours on that one.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah. So
maybe we'll do another one.
Yeah, we'll probably have to do another one because now I'm thinking of all these other books I want to talk about.
I'm looking at my list. But yeah, sweatystartup.com/book list is about 20 books that I love. Max has his books down below in the description. So
thanks for watching, listening.